on the radio. We are here live in the WDAN studios. As you know, we do this every Tuesday at 5 o'clock with your live legal call-in talk show. And we are here tonight to, of course, answer legal questions and discuss various legal topics tonight on the show as we do every single Tuesday. So hopefully you're in your car on the drive home. Share with your friends. Let them know we're on the air. I am here with a special guest who I'll introduce to you in a moment. Some of you may remember him. He's been on the show with us before in the past, so we're super excited to have him back. But of course, I want to, of course, give you all the details on how you can call in, get your questions in, get your comments in. Of course, if you just want to comment on what we're discussing, you're always welcome to do that as well. But for the most part, we are here to answer your legal questions, and you have an hour to do so as we move forward through the show. So the number tonight, in order to call into the studio, which is obviously the best way to get your question asked over the air, that phone number is 727-441-3000. Again, that's going to be 727-441-3000. That's the call-in number tonight for FLA Law on the radio for you to get your questions in and answered as far as legal matters. And then, of course, we're also streaming tonight. So I'm going to give you the two streaming ways that you can watch online if you're not in the car, or you're not by a radio, or you're about to jump out of the car, but you want to keep listening. You can definitely go onto Facebook. If you're a Facebook account, you can go onto Perenich, Caulfield, Noyes Injury Lawyers. And if you look on our page, we are live right now. There should be a red circle around that firm account. Click on it and you'll see myself and our guests in the studio. It's always fun to kind of watch us here, but of course, the radio is always a good way to listen in as well. Then also YouTube. So if you are not a Facebook user, but you want to continue to watch the stream, you can do that on our YouTube channel as well. We're actually streaming live from my partner's YouTube page at the moment. His name is Matthew Noyes. So if you search Matthew Noyes, Mathew, last name Noyes, Noyes, you'll look it up. You should see our live stream. It is feeding through there right now. Right, Ed? Okay. All right. So if you search in Perenich Caulfield, you should be able to find it that way as well. Either way, it's the live stream for FLA Law on the radio. And without further ado, let me reintroduce you to our special guest tonight. And of course, I'll give him a chance to remind you all. Hopefully, our faithful listeners already know who he is, but he'll remind you all who he is. I have criminal defense attorney Zachariah Wade with us. Hi, Zachariah.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good. So glad to have you back. It's been a couple months now, maybe even more than that. It's been a while, but I really enjoyed having you on the show. I don't think we've had a criminal defense lawyer on for a while. So I thought it was great that you were willing to come back and talk to us. So with that being said, if we've got some new listeners on the air who maybe didn't tune in when you were on with us before, give us your intro, your bio. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you work, all the little details.
Sure. And thank you for having me again.
Absolutely.
My name is Zachariah Wade. I'm a criminal defense attorney with the law offices of Russo, Pelletier, and Sullivan. There are three of us lawyers there. We focus specifically on Pinellas County. I handle a lot of violent crime charges that deal with guns, narcotics, domestic violence, things like that.
Okay.
We've got Tim Sullivan, who focuses very heavily on DUIs. I would call him an expert. I think it's fair to say that at this point. And then you've got Mr. Mark Pelletier, who handles a lot of the complex litigation crimes, white collar crime, things like that. Things that you really need a seasoned attorney to sit down and just mull over.
Right.
That's Mark Pelletier. So we're a three-man team. Aside from that, I also serve on the board of directors with the Clearwater Bar Association.
Yes, I believe that's how we met.
Yep, that is how we met. Another one of my titles is Daddy. I have a 2-year-old, so shout out to my
Let's pause
boy.
there. Mm-hmm. How was your Father's Day?
I had a great Father's Day. Actually, the weekend before, we went to the beach.
Okay.
So when Father's Day came around,
I did see your beach set up on Facebook.
Yeah, so I was like, well, we already did that. I took advantage of the opportunity to just stay at home.
Nice.
We ordered in and just watched movies, and I just got to cuddle.
That's my mother. When I have Mother's Day, that's all I do. I'm like, I'm off. Don't ask mommy for anything. Right. Don't make me do anything. I just chill.
None of that. Just enjoyed being a father. And And aside from those things, I also currently serve on the committee to elect Cornelius Demps. He is a judicial candidate, here in the Sixth Circuit. So shout out Cornelius.
Shout out to Cornelius, who was also our guest, I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So for our listeners who are trying to make that connection, that's who we're talking about. And of course, we'll try to get him back on again at some point before the election.
Nice.
Awesome. So, all right. So you said you have a 2-year-old.
I do.
Is he in a terrible 2 stage?
I mean, he has his moments, but even in those moments, I'm to the point now where it's not terrible. It sucks in the moment. I won't lie. Sometimes it can be embarrassing in the grocery store, things like that.
Yeah.
There's just appreciation behind it. So I guess, I mean, he's me. He's like a little version of me. So even when he's frustrated, I can deal with it.
Good. Yeah, I'm definitely in the toddler stage myself. My son turns 3 tomorrow. So yeah, I definitely feel for you. I know what you're going through, but he's very sweet. So he's a good little boy. With that being said, you did give us the rundown of the kind of case that you handle, one of them being violent crimes and so forth. But you've kind of do a little bit of a variety, if you will, in the criminal defense realm. So is there anything that you do right now that you feel is more of your passion?
Ooh. That's a great question. I did not expect it, but I would say domestic violence crimes. And I would say that because, unfortunately, I grew up in a rough environment, probably exposed to some things that kids shouldn't be around. But that really helped shape my focus, especially as an attorney. And when people are facing a domestic charge, there's just a lot of other implications that come with that.
Yeah.
Things like not being able to see your kids, how are bills going to get paid, no contact orders, things like that. So just life experience, I think, help me learn that passion, because right now as an attorney, what I can do is just guide people through that and help. Right. So I like that. Like I said, we focus heavily on DUIs. And aside from that, one of my passions is traffic homicide cases. I know
that's heavy.
Yeah, those are very heavy. You probably didn't expect that. I don't think most lawyers might say that, but I was a prosecutor for 5 years, and I spent a number of those years on the traffic homicide unit. And being on call, having to go out on scene and seeing, literally, I'm not trying to be too graphic, but a body in the road.
Yeah.
It hits home. And so people need seasoned attorneys who can help with those types of cases, because they're always an accident.
Right. So. Don't I know it? It's sad that that's the case in our state, but it is obviously job security for me when we have drivers that you could be the safest driver on the road, but it doesn't prevent accidents from occurring, unfortunately. And so, you could find yourself on either side of that issue where you're the one that has either hurt or lost a loved one, which is who we help, or you could be the one who unfortunately caused the accident, and now you're looking for help and you need advice and you need guidance. So I think that's the beauty of being an attorney. You have to be able to provide the service and the defense on either side of the issue. So that's interesting. So domestics and traffic homicide, that's definitely a bit of a dichotomy there.
Right.
So I wanted to go back. I know we talked about it previously the last time you were here. But we didn't delve into it a whole lot. But you were Stetson trial team, were you not?
Yes, I was on the trial team.
So that is obviously what Stetson is known for, and you get quite a bit of trial experience in doing that and being part of that advocacy program at Stetson. So I want to talk about what was it like doing that in the mock scenario versus in real life now that you're actually trying real cases?
That's a great question. And I would liken the different things that you can do during law school being primarily like law review, moot court, or trial team. Those are I call them the big three.
Yeah.
I would liken those two. If you think about a high school, I think about the trial team people as like, I don't know if I'm going to rub anyone the wrong way by saying this, but I think the trial team kids are the jocks.
Yeah,
those are the cool kids. We think we're hot shots. That kind of
I can see that.
Never mind the other two. I don't. Like I said, I don't want to offend anybody. But being in that mindset, right? Because we represented Stetson all across the country. So there was, and when I came to Stetson, we were already the number one trial team in the nation.
And
so there was
still
a
are.
lot of responsibility and still are.
Mhm.
They call it the long green line. And that's a reference to all of the attorneys that came before you, all of the ones that are going to come after you,
Right.
standing on the shoulders of giants mentality.
Right.
And so going into that, it's not just trial team. It's not just a mock trial. You have some of the top law schools across the country and even international competition sometimes.
Yeah.
So I would say the pressure of that initially is what that was the smack on the butt in law school. Was like, this is real, because when it's not mock trial, someone, as they are now, is going to be standing next to you with a big decision resting on your advice and your expertise. So the pressure of being on that team helped already. And then the time commitment. We're talking on weekends, at least 12-hour days.
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday, late nights. It's time intensive, but it gets you ready for real life.
I was just going to say, is that any different than actual trial prep?
No, I would say that now, the time, I can save myself some time, because obviously we've got some, we're a little more seasoned now. We have some procedures and practices under our belt, but the commitment, the ability to shut everything else off, sit down and focus on a case and dissect some legal intricate issues is right. You can't replace that commitment.
Yeah. And I would imagine it's similar in the sense that now you're trying cases and you're still juggling your own caseload and all the other things you have in life. Like you said, you have a 2-year-old, all your life responsibilities, and then all your other clients, and all your other clients have cases, and they all think that that's the most important case to them, because it is. That's the only case they have. And then you've got this trial that may be coming up. I think it's similar in the sense that with trial team, you had trial team, but you still had all those other classes that you had to still focus on and prepare for. And those things didn't go away just because you had a competition coming up. So I think that in that same regard, that it also helped prepare you in that way, right?
Absolutely. And then, of course, on top of that, there's just the experience of getting a case packet, a fact pattern, pulling it apart, learning how to build a direct examination, a cross, a recross, if it goes there, you know what I mean? Right. Emotions and getting the words under your belt, because a lot of times, though, we'll fumble with our words as an attorney, but by the time I graduated from law school, introducing evidence and arguing motions, it was smooth. That's the best way to say it. And we learned that not just from a book. It was from actual, not even professors, but actual practicing lawyers.
Right.
Like a woman who I call my guru, her name's Julia Metz. She's a phenomenal trial attorney. She was a prosecutor when she was my trial team coach. And she's one of the reasons that I stepped into being a prosecutor, because that hands-on, side-by-side coaching is just... you can't replace that. So shout out to Stetson's trial team for getting me ready.
Yeah. And that's similar to what Cece said when he was here, Cornelius, when he was here a couple of weeks ago, who was also trial team. But one thing I want to ask is, to obviously taking it back to the beginning of your career. Now you've passed the bar, you're practicing, and you're in a courtroom in front of a jury now. What was some of the differences that you maybe noticed? Like, okay, this ain't trial team no more anymore. This is a whole different ball game. Did you ever have that moment at all?
No. And I'm thinking about that, to give you an honest answer. And I say no, because I treated it like the real thing in law school. Maybe not everyone went as hard as I did, but I just to put it in context, I didn't grow up in a family of lawyers. I'm the only one in my family who graduated from college and has gone on to, higher education. So when I stepped into law school and now I'm on the number one trial team in the nation, you're not going to catch me slipping. So when And in law school, I was an intern at the state attorney's office as a law student, and that was also my first job out of law school. Right. So it was kind of a smooth transition.
That seems pretty seamless, yeah.
I'll say the first time I saw someone sentenced on my case, that's when it sort of hit home, because you walk through that door, I'm going home and you're not. And I have to make sure that as a prosecutor, I made that happen in the right way. Yeah. That's, I think, when it hit home. But in terms of the workload and the hours, I was ready.
You were fully prepared, I'm sure, probably beyond prepared.
I think so. Looking back, I'll say I was ready. Who knows?
Right. Okay. So then, before we start getting into some particulars when it comes to the kind of cases that you handle, and we're going to talk about DUI, we'll talk about traffic stops and things like that. But I want to get kind of just more of a little bit of a general sense of you and your approach to trial and what you do. have you encountered any issues in the courtroom in terms of dealing with opposing counsel or, selecting a jury or just having a judge who maybe you didn't agree with what happened there? Is there anything that stands out to you or you felt like this was a tough issue and this is how I handled it?
Absolutely. I think the term or the phrase choose your battles is paramount because you really do have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that you come back to this, at least I come back to this building every day. So I don't want to leave a horrible lasting impression on anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's
your reputation precedes you. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'll give a quick example. I was on time to court one morning. The judge was a little late, which happens. Not a slight to the judge at all. But when they came on the bench, I wasn't in the courtroom, and they got a little upset at me. We can't be waiting for you, type of thing. And I had to stand my ground and say respectfully, Your Honor, I was here. I was here. That's all I said. It was just 3 words. I was here, and I said just like that. I was here.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes a difference. So it's situational. And that's obviously talking to a judge. When I talk to opposing counsel, there's the same level of respect. It just comes out differently because there's an expectation that the prosecutor is doing their job and doing it the right way. My job as a defense attorney is if I catch you slipping, I'm going to call you out and make you do your job the right way.
Right.
I think there's a right and a wrong way to do that. Having been a prosecutor, I know the wrong way.
Yeah.
I know what it's like when you get a call from a defense attorney who wants to breathe down your neck and get their way. And that's just not how we communicate as people.
Yeah.
So I say that to say that I don't find too many communication issues with the office of the state attorney. There are sometimes you got to climb the ladder and knock on the right door. But all of the prosecutors that I come into contact with, we have very professional interactions, and I'm thankful for that.
That's positive to hear. And I think I could say on the civil side that's been my experience as well, that most interactions with opposing counsel are usually professional. That being said, there are other jurisdictions in the state of Florida, because I do practice across the entire state. They might be a little different depending on where we are in the state. I'm not going to necessarily name names, but South Florida, it's not always the same professionalism. But, at the end of the day, you have to handle it with grace. And like you said, choosing your battles is what's most important. Because
you said Broward County?
I didn't name names. I did not name names. But at the end of the day, I think my motto has always been you can win more with honey than vinegar. And so despite what may occur between opposing counsel or how nasty of an email you might get or some sort of motion that's completely off the wall, my response usually is to not respond right away. Give it a second. My first initial email might get typed and deleted. And then
I do not put the to name in my email if I'm responding in that circumstance, because I don't want to accidentally send this one.
Exactly. And it may stay in the draft folder until you decide how you want to proceed. And usually it ends up being deleted, and then a more professional response is created. And it usually works because they realize, okay, she's not giving me fire for fire or vinegar for vinegar, and that she's trying to be professional, and so it tends to bring the tone down. So I'm encouraged that you have that same or similar experience of professionalism here in the Tampa Bay area. But at the end of the day, you're so experienced in what you do. I feel like you could manage regardless of what the circumstances was, because again, you had that background, that training at Stetson, which I think is just immeasurable.
True story.
With that being said, do you have any crazy jury stories of things that might have happened in trial?
I've had a couple jurors recognize me that, they get, eliminated during jury selection, but that's always cool. And one of them actually pointed at me. This was when I was at the state. There's a moment in jury selection where the judge will ask all of the people who might, be selected to sit on the jury to look around, look at the lawyers, look at everybody, see if you recognize anyone. And a woman stood up, pointed at me, and said, "I know him. He's a really good lawyer." And I was like, "Well,
wow,
that was okay."
Judge, I'd like to keep her.
Cool. Right? Let's put a gold star next to her. Obviously, she was excused,
of course.
But that was one that stood out. I'll say that I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I think each trial is different. There are always small, unique little things that happen. No runaway jury type stories yet, though.
Nothing yet, huh?
Crazy.
Keep on living, huh? Is that what they say?
It'll happen, right? Keep having birthdays.
Yeah. With that being said, like you said, every trial is different. So I want to get your take on what do you think is the most important element of a trial? Because I've heard different theories. I have my own theory. But some people say you win and lose your trial at jury selection, that depending on how well of a jury you pick, that could be the end of your case right then and there. Have heard some people say that the jury has their mind made up after the opening statements, and that doesn't really matter what happens after that they've already come to their conclusion. So do you have a thought or a theory as far as what you think is the most important element of a trial?
Yes, and I think it actually has nothing to do with being an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that most people in a courtroom don't pay attention to, which is just being a genuine human being.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I'm meeting a jury or a panel, they've never met me, and that's by design. They look at you, and like people, we make assumptions and predictions about people based on how they look, and that's fine. What I really enjoy and what I think is really influential is when I get to speak to the panel.
Yeah.
Because during jury selection is the only time that you can be cordial and kind of
Exactly.
relaxed and talk to them and show them who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you're going to have a hard time showing other people. And I don't mean, I don't mean a deep soul searching adventure. I mean, just know who you are, be confident in the things that you can and can't do. For example, I can be kind of dynamic in trial. With one of the last trials we had.
What do you mean by dynamic?
If I have to yell to get your attention, if you're not looking at me, I'm going to wake you up because I need you to listen. This is important. And but it also, I learned that if you do something else like lower your voice,
soften your voice, right?
You can draw people in like that. Mm-hmm. Just changing your tone. So
and pauses can be very effective.
Way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some people have looked at me and said, Zachariah, man, you really got going. That was cool. And I've seen other attorneys in some ways try to emulate that.
Sure.
And I've also been a trial team coach at Stetson and a trial advocacy professor at Stetson. So I've had the opportunity to talk to young lawyers and tell them, you're not me.
Right.
And I'm not you.
Trying to copy someone else's style is not going to come across as authentic.
At all. Being genuine is what gets you the farthest. Obviously, being prepared, the experience, the ability to sit down and understand the work in front of you, that's irreplaceable. But I would say the X factor is knowing yourself enough to communicate openly with other people, especially if you can, I'll say, like, make a joke about yourself. I'm a big guy. Mm-hmm. And when I was a prosecutor, I always started my jury selection by kind of ragging on myself and pointing out biases by explaining ingredients on pizza and saying that some people might not like anchovies or some people might not like pineapple, but that just registers. And I would lead into it by saying,
just need to know what you like.
Guy, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about something I like, pizza.
Yeah.
I know myself, so I'm comfortable doing that. And I know that's a long answer to a short question, but I think it makes a big difference.
No, that's important because that's exactly what we wanted to discuss. I think also you have to understand that the jury has walls up. A lot of them don't even want to be there. Right. They would rather be at work or with their families. They have zero interest in this case that's being tried. And if they just see you as this stoic, overpaid attorney who is just wasting everybody's time, it's hard to get through to them. So I think you're absolutely right when it comes to that, kind of bringing that wall down and helping them to understand who you are and why they're there, and that they have a responsibility as jurors, and that you appreciate their presence, and that I'm going to try to make this as painless as I can for you by making it somewhat interesting. So I think that's good. That's a good approach. So what's kind of, before we take a quick break, what's something that you is that kind of like the takeaway you give? Let's say you taught trial advocacy and your students are getting ready to go into their final trial. Is that kind of what you share, is just be authentic,
That, and that there is no substitute for the work. What is it that
so true.
What is the phrase? It's like something beats talent when hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Mm-hmm. That is 100% true. There's just no substitute for that. So being genuine and actually knowing that you have a duty as an attorney. This is not a normal job.
Right.
You need to put in those hours. Those are the most important things, other than, all the procedure and legal work that has to be done.
Exactly. That reminds me of a funny thing, and I don't remember if I learned it in trial or not, but it's like when you have the law on your side, you pound the law. When you have the facts on your side, you pound the facts. And if you have neither one, you pound the table.
There you go.
But that is a good segue to a short break. And then we're going to get into some interesting stuff, some current events, and talk about more specifically some of the things that you do. Let's take a short break, and we'll be back in about 1 or 2 minutes with FLA Law on the radio.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
In 1955, the law firm now known as Perenich, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes made a decision. Instead of taking whatever cases came through their doors, they decided to focus specifically on personal injury. 64 years later, the law firm is one of Clearwater's longest-running personal injury firms. Available 24 hours a day with offices in Clearwater and throughout Tampa Bay, they're ready to put decades of experience to work for you if you or a loved one has been injured in a car accident or injured due to someone's negligence or recklessness. If you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or unsure about your next steps after being involved in an accident or after a loved one sustained serious injuries due to someone else's negligence, call Perenich, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes at 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. That's 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. Non-attorney spokesman.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
And we're back with FLA Law live on the radio. If you've been tuned in, then you know we are here with criminal defense attorney Zachariah Wade. He has been giving us some insights into who he is. And also we've been talking a lot about trials and how they proceed and just basically his outlook on the trial process. But with that being said, let's jump into some criminal defense discussion because that is what he does. That's his bread and butter. So let's talk about some things. And I think what's important to people nowadays is what they encounter often. And I feel like most adults at this point in their life likely have encountered an officer at some phase, whether it's a speeding ticket or some sort of traffic infraction. But maybe there's listeners out there who've never encountered an officer, never been pulled over, and have no clue what they would do in that situation. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. So I think the first, blatant question that stands out to me is, what do you do if you're pulled over by police? You see those red and blue lights behind you. You don't know what you did or why you're getting pulled over. What should you do in that scenario?
Well, pull over.
Yeah.
And I know that's a simple answer, but that's the truth because you are required to immediately pull over, but not in a place that might be unsafe, right?
Okay.
Not if there's no shoulder or it's not well lit or things like that. Within reason, you can continue to drive and pull over. I would caution you though, because don't take too long doing that.
Yeah.
They call it slow rolling. They'll be on the radio and say he's slow rolling me, and that's an indicator, or it can be an indicator to law enforcement that you're concealing something.
You're trying to hide something.
Yeah, or that you're trying to think, well, am I going to smash the gas or am I going to pull over? So it kind of makes them nervous. But the most important piece of information is just pull over at the next safest location.
Yeah. And with that point, I remember seeing a video not long ago of a district attorney in some other jurisdiction. She was outside of Florida when she went all the way home, pulled into the garage and completely walked away and was like, what do you want? So
she should have been. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how that ended because I saw the same video, but she should have been arrested. That was definitely her using her privilege and her position to
clearly
avoid criminal culpability. And that was wild.
Yeah.
I would have kind of liked to see her arrested and
Yeah, and I thought that's what was going to happen. I commend the officer in that video because he stood his ground. He wouldn't let her just walk in the house and walk away. But you're right. I don't know what actually came of it. But anyway, so you got to stop. You can't just keep driving. You can't go all the way home and pull up in your driveway because you're scared. What would you recommend after that? Once you stop, how much should you say? Did you
as
word
little
bomb
as
it?
possible? No, definitely not word bomb it. Keep that inside. And I think it's important to remember that in any other human interaction, we are by design communicators.
Sure.
We want to speak. We want to explain. If an officer says, I pulled you over because you were going too fast and this was just a ticket, but your eyes are really red. What's going on there?
Yeah.
We want to explain, I'm tired, my allergies or anything else. But the better option is to just be quiet, because as soon as what you have just said is documented, now he's thinking allergies. Okay, well, why do I smell alcohol? And then you start explaining that, and it starts a conversation that you could benefit more from without having.
That's exactly what I tell people when I'm preparing them for depositions. Actually, it's funny because I said, look, the more you say, whether you believe it or not, you think you're helping yourself, but you're actually hurting yourself. And so in normal conversation, that's okay. We talk, we explain, we talk over each other, we start chit-chatting, go on tangents. That's not what you do in this scenario. Right. Because if anything, the more you say, you're just giving them more rope. And more rope and more rope and more rope. Eventually, they're going to hang you with it.
And it feels weird. It's so uncomfortable. I'm kind of programmed there, but I can acknowledge that a normal person who's probably never been pulled over, you're standing there, you got a badge and a gun, and it's intimidating. Yeah. You can't leave even if you wanted to, and you want to explain. So
So then when the officer comes up, do they have to tell you why they're pulling you over?
Yeah, because they have to have probable cause for their stop. They can't just pull you over for no reason.
Okay.
I think that the problem some people run into is when they ask the officer, why did you pull me over? And they'll tell them, and they disagree.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
not
wasn't
true.
speeding.
Yeah.
I didn't run that stop sign.
Yeah.
I wasn't swerving. And what doesn't get enough credit is right then and there, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
So that's why it's more important just to not talk, because now you're argumentative. Now you're not cooperative. It just changes the dynamic of the interaction.
Yeah. So is there ever appropriate time then when the officer can say, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you to step out of your vehicle? And if so, do you have to agree?
Really, at any point, an officer can ask you to do that. And that's for reasons of officer safety. They really don't need any other reason other than that. And I think I can understand that. The world is a crazy place. We know that there are people who affirmatively do not like the police. And I think that these men and women deserve to keep themselves safe. So that rule kind of makes sense to me. But to answer your question more pointedly, they can ask you out. And it's just to make sure that they're safe. Make sure you're not in the vehicle. Maybe you're fumbling around, making them nervous. There's nothing wrong with them asking you out. And you do have to get out. We see a lot of videos
was my next question.
of step out of the vehicle. No, I'm not getting out. And they tell you, if you don't get out, I'm going to snatch you out. And it sounds real bad, but they're allowed to do that. So the path of least resistance is just hop out. Okay.
And then what about when they get you out and they ask to search your vehicle?
Well, you can say no.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that authoritative relationship that we have with law enforcement kind of presupposes in some people's minds that you need to just do what they say.
Right.
And that's what you hear a lot on TV. Just listen, just cooperate, just do what they say.
Anything they ask for, just do it. But that's not always the case.
No, and it's not always in your best interest. You might have something in there. And even if you know that you're wrong for having it, it doesn't mean that you have to just turn that over to law enforcement. You don't have to. You are allowed to say, no, you cannot search my vehicle.
Right.
They'll probably still find a way to get in there, but
I was just about to say, now there are incidences where they can search your vehicle, right? If they're now going to arrest you and they ran your license and there's a warrant or something like that, then at that point, I think, isn't it true that they would then have a right to then search the vehicle?
Absolutely. There are a number of different ways that law enforcement can get in your vehicle. I think what we see most common in my world is odor. Things like that, and specifically marijuana.
That thing there, yeah.
And a lot of people might raise an eyebrow because they would say, well, I have my card. I'm good on that.
Yeah.
But even if you have your card, that doesn't confirm to that officer that, whatever they're smelling was legally bought, that it's in its container, all the good stuff that they check for. And so they are allowed to ask you out even for the odor of marijuana, even if you're allowed to have it.
Right.
But odor, and I would say if they find you sleeping in your car, they are almost always going to ask you to get out of it because typically if the car is on and your foot's on the brake, if they don't reach in and turn it off themselves, they're definitely going to get you out of there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how do you know if you're being detained? Because you just made a good point when you said when you pull over and you it's this automatic feeling of being intimidated. You have an officer, they got a gun, they got a badge, can't leave. Or can you leave? So that's the question that I think a lot of people may have in their mind. Do I have to stay here? Do I have to keep talking to this officer? when is it okay for me to say, all right, I'm leaving? Or is it ever okay?
Oh, yeah. I want to be very careful with that answer because I don't think it's ever a good idea. Even if you know you're 100% in the right, I still don't think it's a good idea to say, I'm leaving because you're not going to be right in that moment. You have to acknowledge that when you interact with the law enforcement, they are taught something called command presence. And what that means is they are the figure of authority. What they say goes. And if their perspective right now is that they're in the right and you're telling them that they're wrong, their perspective dictates what happens in that situation. The law is going to dictate what happens in the courtroom, but right then and there, they're the one that's in charge.
Right.
So it's important to just acknowledge that a lawyer is going to be your best option. If you feel like let me say this. There's case law that says about how long you can be held there. For example, if an officer smells marijuana, but he doesn't have a dog in his car, or he doesn't even smell it, he just wants a dog to come check your car.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of time that he has to be able to get that dog in there.
Before you can say, okay, this has gotten too long of a detention.
Exactly. It's situational. But let's say it's been 30 minutes and you're in the car like, man, that dog's not here yet. I'm leaving. I would probably still not leave.
Yeah. You can't just drive off.
Right. He's going to chase you.
Okay. And we've seen those. We've seen those videos where the people just pull off and it's not a good idea. You've heard it here, folks.
Yeah, speaking of that, too, Sheriff Caulfield just did a press conference where he announced that the sheriff's office is implementing a procedure where if you flee, they're going to, I think he said they're going to seize your car or motorcycle, whatever it is. They're going to take it. Yeah. Probably sell it and make some money for their budget. So heads up.
Don't flee then. If you had no incentive before, I think that is a good incentive to just sit there and wait and take your ticket or comply. Yeah. So speaking of traffic stops, let's get into a current event. You and I have been talking about this off the air. It was in part of the news intro if they were listening just before the show. One of my favorites. I think it was it last night or this morning?
It was, I think it was early. Technically both.
Yeah, like technically late night, early morning when no good things happen. One of my favorites, Justin Timberlake, was arrested for DWI up in the Hamptons. So I feel like I got a criminal defense attorney here. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
He was arrested at 12:37 a.m.
Okay.
The basis for his traffic stop was running a stop sign, and what I read said that he failed to keep his vehicle to the right. I'm not sure what that meant, but I liken that to a failure to maintain a single lane.
Okay,
basically,
he's basically swerving. Yeah.
Basically, he was getting his swerve on.
Wow.
He told law enforcement that he had a single martini. And I don't drink martinis, but I'm pretty sure that if it's a true martini, that means it's all alcohol.
It's alcohol. Okay, yeah. It's a strong drink. Yeah. It's not a wine cooler. Yeah.
Okay. So he got out. He said he only had one. We'll just let that stand on itself. He got out this morning around 9:30. He was put on ROR, which to me means he probably doesn't have a prior DUI.
Okay. Yeah. More likely than not. Yeah. Yeah. So let's back up. All right. So he got pulled over and let's dissect what he did and what he said. So obviously the officer noticed he was swerving, not maintaining the lane, and he ran a stop sign apparently. All this is allegedly. Yeah. So it sounds like he disclosed that he had drank and that he had a martini. Is that something that you would advise against? Would you admit to the fact that you've already consumed alcohol and the kind of alcohol that you drank, or would you not really advise to do that when you know you've been drinking?
I would plead the fifth.
Yeah.
In that situation, just be quiet. I wouldn't encourage you to lie.
Yeah. Just don't say anything about it.
Don't say anything. Mm-hmm. Don't try to explain because it's so common that people actually say, I just had 2 beers because you think that 2 beers in whatever amount of time, that's not going to get me over the legal limit.
Yeah.
But what I know is that everyone is different and everyone's body processes alcohol differently. 2 beers in an hour for me, and I don't drink regularly, that'll do it for me.
Yeah.
Someone who drinks 6 in 2 hours, that's not going to get them there. So it's just not a good answer, even if it is true. But the best option is obviously don't drink and drive. Even one can impair your judgment depending on the drink, depending on you.
Right.
But I would strongly advise against providing incriminating information to law enforcement. Do not do that.
Oh, man, Justin. So then I feel like there's clearly probable cause. There was the swerving. There was the running of the stop sign again, allegedly. And then I think he said he also smelled the odor of alcohol. Yeah. What I saw or heard earlier, they said something about glassy, red eyes. Why does all that matter? Does that have any significance? And if so, what?
All of that is tremendously important, because for everything that a law enforcement officer does, there has to be a reason. They cannot just act arbitrarily.
Yeah.
And those reasons in the legal world is called probable cause. So you have to have probable cause to initiate a traffic stop, basically meaning that law enforcement officer has to see you commit a traffic violation to pull you over.
Right.
Or, a call came in and said, hey, that red car is driving crazy, we're afraid, that kind of thing.
Right.
As long as there's probable cause, you have a lawful traffic stop. But that just being pulled over doesn't in and of itself mean that a DUI investigation can happen, or that a search can happen, or that an arrest can happen. Yeah. Probable cause has to be established for each step of the process. So if the law enforcement officer has a valid traffic stop, that might be awesome. Maybe Justin did run the stop sign, and that's probable cause for a good stop. But if those other things weren't true, meaning he had no bloodshot eyes, no odor of alcohol, he wasn't swaying or anything like that, then that officer wouldn't have any reason to suspect him of being DUI. And if he started an investigation without that, then we have a legal issue. We have a motion to dismiss.
Right. Okay. I don't know if I heard anything about him submitting to any field sobriety testing or breathalyzer.
I think he refused the breath test, which is his right.
Okay.
And if you're concerned that your breath test result might be over the legal limit, you are allowed to exercise that right.
Sure.
He also didn't do field sobriety exercises, I believe, from what I read, which, again, totally his right.
Okay. And so if you decline those things, and I could be completely wrong, because, again, I've never practiced criminal defense law a day in my life, but isn't there some caveat to that? If you decline those things, that you could lose your license?
Absolutely. If you're arrested for DUI and you blow over the legal limit, you can get your license suspended for 6 months. Okay. If you refuse the breath test, it can be 9. Okay. And if you continue to get arrested for DUIs, those numbers go up.
Okay.
So there are implications there, and that's specific to the breath test, though. When it comes to field sobriety exercises, there's no mandatory punishment for not doing those.
Yeah.
It can hurt you a little bit in terms of the context of your case.
Yeah.
Because why would you not do these, right?
Yeah.
That's the question.
I would not do them because I can't do some of that stuff sober.
That's what so many people say. That is the wrong thing to say on a DUI stop.
Right. I don't even know, though. Do they still ask people to say the alphabet backwards? Because I definitely cannot do that.
No, it's not backwards. It's called the modified Romberg alphabet test. And what they ask you to do is say the alphabet one letter at a time without singing it. So it's just a straightforward rendition there.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to do it backwards. Yeah.
I had a question, and I could never say the alphabet backwards. Stone cold sober. But difference between DUI and DWI.
Good point, Ed, because I saw some people commenting on the Justin Timberlake charge, and I think it was a DWI. Right. And people are like, well, there's a difference. That means he was high. He wasn't drunk. And I'm like, no, that's not what it means. So can you clarify that? That's a good question, Ed.
That is a great question. And for me, the difference is jurisdictional, meaning where that person is arrested. The Hamptons are in New York. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So in New York, it might not be DUI. It might be DWI, which I believe stands for driving while impaired.
Right.
DUI is driving under the influence, but DUI can be under the influence of alcohol, a controlled substance, or some other chemical. So it's all under the same umbrella. It's just a different name.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Down here we have Publix, and up there I think they have Kroger.
Kroger's, like right, so
it's just a different name.
Yep, and it's just still going to be dealing with some of the same issues and facts as far as what you should say and not say. And so, all right, so you can refuse the breathalyzer and the field sobriety testing, but there could be implications with that if you choose to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you said he was released RR. So explain to our listeners what RR means, on his own recognizance, right?
Yep, released on his own recognizance. That means that basically there's no reason that the judge would believe you're just going to leave, that you're not going to come. They're not requiring you to post a monetary bond or bail, which in his situation...
He's on tour, though. He's going to leave. He's going to be all over the country.
That can be a special condition of ROR. He had an attorney jump right on, so obviously that guy knows what he's doing. Sure. And I'm sure at that first hearing, he asked for permission to allow him to continue traveling.
Yeah.
And I would say that the fact that he was on tour can also lend itself to some of the context of his refusal to do the exercises, because my understanding is that Justin Timberlake is a performer. This guy is a dancer. He doesn't just stand there and sing.
Oh, for
He's
sure.
up on the stage that was like leaning and doing all this crazy stuff. It was
crazy. I just saw him Friday for the listeners out there. So yeah, I mean, it was a amazing show.
So I think that means he was probably physically exhausted.
Sleep deprived, I'm sure.
Who knows if he injured himself during any of those performances?
Yeah.
You know, things happen all the time. Chris Brown just got stuck hanging from the ceiling at one of his shows. So things happen. You never know what information is going to come to help his case.
Right. And so any of that, his lawyer could potentially say, you know, these were the reasons for the bloodshot, glassy eyes and and the swerving. He hadn't slept and, you know, okay. Well, we will certainly see how that plays out. I just thought that was, look, it's on the TV in front of us here in the studio. I
Not
thought
a bad
that
mugshot. I've seen worse. Honestly.
His eyes are kind of red, though.
His face is kind of flat.
So, but yeah, so we'll see how that plays out. But of course, for our listeners, that's great advice. And I wanted to talk about one more thing. And so driving with suspended license has also been in the news and the blogs and the media. We talked about it last week or the week before with CC as well. This was big in the news about the guy who came to the Zoom hearing on a suspended license charge.
Poor guy.
And he was physically driving his car in the Zoom hearing. And so there's been so much that has happened with that story since we first talked about it, because it was like initially you felt for the poor guy. I'm like, oh man, he apparently did have his license suspended, but it was supposed to be reinstated because of a child support thing. And then it turns out that he never actually had a license at all.
Right.
So let's break that down from a criminal defense perspective. What are we talking about here? How does he have a suspended license when he apparently never even had a license?
It's hard to explain because it is so simple. Your license can just simply be suspended. I would say that, picture it like this. In the state of Florida, they say drive, or really anywhere, they say driving is a privilege.
Yeah.
So it's that thing over there that you have to go get. And hold on, I just blinked on your question.
Yeah. So this guy, apparently, there's layers to this. Like, he's apparently been already charged with a suspended license, right? So he's coming to a hearing, apparently. It looks like we had a public defender there at the hearing. And he comes on the video in the car, and he's telling the judge, wait a minute, judge, just give me a second here. I'm, backing into my doctor's appointment. And he literally is driving behind the wheel. And that's the first thing the judge says is, am I seeing this correctly? Are you like literally driving? So that's issue number one. And then number two, as the facts continue to play out, apparently he never even had a license ever.
Right.
So I don't even know how you can have a suspended license when there's never even had one. So those are the two issues.
Thank you for bringing me back, because that is a very nuanced answer, and I lost myself trying to decipher it, so I had to write it down. And the answer is this: driving is a privilege, something that you sit over here, and it's something that you can go get by going to obtain your driver's license.
Yeah.
But it's also something that the state can say, nah, you're not going to get this privilege. It exists as your license, driver's license privilege exists, and the state can say, no, you're not even going to do it. It's like your mom telling you there's no Christmas this year in July.
Yeah.
It's not even here yet. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And the same concept.
But when it gets here, you're not getting anything.
Record.
Yeah.
Right. And that typically happens when a person is committing traffic violations, or I would say also drug charges. If you're convicted of a drug charge, that can suspend your license as well.
Right. Okay.
So things like that are happening that end up putting an administrative suspension on a person's license.
Gotcha.
So that when they go get it, they might already be under a 5-year suspension and not even know. And
never even knew.
So that's how he could fall into that situation,
right?
Where we all know that if you don't pay your child support, they will suspend your license.
Yeah.
And so that it sounds like that's what happened, is that he was probably in arrears.
Yeah.
There might have still been some money owed, and even though he never had a license, the state looked at that money owed and said, well, you're not going to get one.
You can't even get one because it's now suspended.
Yeah.
Wow. So then, what do you have any situations like that where you have a client they're coming into a Zoom hearing, and then boom, they're on the hearing doing something so stupid that you're like, oh my God. Have you ever had anything like that
Not
happen?
on Zoom.
Yeah.
I haven't had any situations like that live, but I warn my clients about things like that.
Yeah, you gotta prepare them beforehand. My goodness.
For example, if you're gonna resolve a DUI as a DUI, your license is going to be suspended that day. So I'll make sure that my clients know when you come to the courthouse, don't drive. Or
don't drive
prepare
yourself to
Uber,
court.
Things like that. Just kind of prepare them. And if they're on a suspended license charge, I always make sure they know, don't touch a steering wheel. Judge Syracuse has a famous line where he says, treat every steering wheel like it's a bomb. And that logic applies. Just stay away from it. So just getting out in front of that is the best way to avoid that entirely.
Yeah. And you think the judge got it right in that situation with the gentleman where he just issued a bench warrant and was like, you got to be in jail tonight at 6:00.
I think the judge did what he had to do because otherwise, if the judge had not revoked his bond, issued the KPS and taken him in, the judge is sending a message that you can have an open driving on a suspended license case in my courtroom. And if you drive, I'm not going to take you to jail. That's the wrong message. The judge is the law. They are the metaphorical law in the courtroom. So they got to stick to it. He did what he had to do. And he said that. He looked at the PD like, what do you want me to do? So it made sense.
Oh my gosh. And then I remember somebody commented and was like, and then he drove himself to jail at 6:00 that evening.
I mean, at that point,
it's like you might as well.
Yeah.
You're already doing it illegally.
The car will be there when you get out, so you can just, I guess, drive away from the jail too.
Yeah. And so we've talked a lot about social media comments and things like that, because obviously nowadays things that are big in the media will be on blogs, and that's just the way our culture is now. How do you feel about that when it comes to your clients in criminal cases? Because I'm very passionate when it comes to my injury clients, and I say, do not post on social media about your accident or your injuries. When you do, that can open up discovery for the defense to now ask the court to compel you to produce your stories and your pages and all these things. So just don't do it. Don't talk about it, and don't delete it because it's already there now. It's evidence, but just refrain from doing that sort of thing, especially in the days of TikTok. I feel like people now document every single thing in their life. Come to court with me, get ready with me. It's like, why would you do that? But that's just my take on it. I don't do criminal defense work. And so do you have any feelings one way or the other, kind of as we get ready to close out, about what you should do if you've been charged, you've been arrested, you're pending trial or anything like that? What should you do about social media?
Definitely don't post anything. Even more than I would advise someone to not speak to law enforcement in person, I would say don't post about it later on social media.
Yeah.
Obviously, don't post any videos of yourself committing crimes, even though we see that.
I'm
shocked that I actually have to say that. But don't do anything illegal on the internet. Don't post about an open case. Don't attack anyone who's, even if they're not your friend and you think that they can't see it, don't do that. And if you have anyone who you're an opponent for, a civil or criminal, I would unfriend them and not give them that access.
Very good idea.
It's very personal.
Keep your accounts private for sure. And don't accept friend requests from people you don't know while those are pending. And it just made me think of that YSL Rico trial with Young Thug. Don't make songs about crimes either, because that can now come back to bite you as well. So just be careful with social media, folks. I think that's universal for civil and criminal. Zachariah, it's been awesome having you on the show. I'm sure we could have kept going and talking about all kinds of stuff. There were other things that we didn't get to get into, but we'll have you back, I'm sure, again in the future. But give everybody in these last few minutes your info, how to find you, how to reach you. We hope they never need you, but if they do find themselves in those criminal circumstances, how can they find you?
You can call me directly. My cell phone number is 727-247-9993. I'm old school, so I'm going to say it twice. It's 727-247-9993. I'm also on social media. My Instagram is Defense Attorney Z. I have a Facebook, but I'm probably not going to accept any requests on Facebook. That's, like I said, that's too personal. And I'm with the law offices of Russo, Pelletier, and Sullivan. I just want to thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And, if anyone needs me, give me a call.
All right, folks, that is FLA Law live on the radio. I hope you enjoyed the show. As you know, we'll be back next Tuesday, as we are every Tuesday at 5 p.m. answering your legal questions live on the air. We are the attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes, and we will see you next Tuesday.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Monica Ricks. Millions of Americans across the country are dealing with dangerous weather conditions today, including extreme heat. At least 21 states are now under excessive heat warnings. These guys in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I am concerned about it.
It's really hot, so I just don't want to, I want to avoid any chance of a heat stroke or anything like that.
WCBS TV meteorologist John Elliott's tracking high temps now in the Northeast.
We are working our way to 90, then we stay there quite a while. Heat index values over 100 by Friday.
Out west, thousands have been forced from their homes now due to raging wildfires. Lee Smith's in New Mexico.
Sheriff drove down the street with the sirens going and his bullhorn saying, you have 5 minutes and don't try to take everything. You need to get out.
A fire there already damaging at least 500 homes. Meantime, Texas is bracing for a possible tropical storm.
Houston expecting up to 6 inches of rain, up to 10 inches in Brownsville and